All right, so basically two outrages today where we're basically just screwing veterans over for no reason other than that I guess we just don't want them around anymore and we wish they just goddamn die. But you'll see. Just two stories. First of all, watch this. I'm afraid they're going to take everything. Marine veteran gets letter from VA saying he needs to pay back $100,000. So, thousands of low-income veterans receiving pension payments from the VA are being told they were overpaid and need to pay it back. All right, and there's the gentleman right there. The bottom line of this story is that this happened over a pretty long period of time. So I'm just going to skip down here a little bit. The U.S. Marine Corps veteran made ends meet with pension payments from the VA and Social Security after he turned 62. Key point there. It was like $2,400 a month. Strangely similar, to my mind, to the amount that illegal immigrants are getting every month, I'm told. Basically around that, something like that, having done nothing. Well, okay, except show up. And that doesn't include housing, doesn't include school and whatever benefits and what happens when they go to the hospital because they can't pay and all that kind of stuff. But we'll leave that aside. That's coming in a minute anyway. Not a lot, but enough to pay to get by. Okay, so this is the letter that he received. He's going to be paying back, I guess, they're determining $221 a month, basically, I guess, till the day he dies, because it adds up to $108,000 and $108,094. All right, but here's a little more to the story. So he probably was getting around an extra $10,000 a year. What happened was he was getting VA benefits, and then he got Social Security on top of that. And he was supposed to report that, but he never did. And he probably didn't know. He says he didn't know. But that went on for 10 years. So between 2011 and 2022, due to discrepancies in DA data matching, VA was unable to reliably verify the self-reported federal incomes of veterans and survivors receiving pensions. Okay, so they're supposed to check, obviously, and they couldn't. So they're kind of like, well, we'll just wait around until we figure it out, I guess. That's a long time to go, 11 years, 10, 11 years. And I think, as we all know, that if we send in our IRS money and we find out later that we should have gotten some kind of a tax deduction, we've got 3 years, 1, 2, 3 to get it back. And if you don't do it by then, it's gone permanently forever, no matter what kind of proof you bring. You can't come back 10 years later and say, oh, I should have gotten $5,000 back on that return from a long time ago. And, so can you give it to me now? Maybe plus interest because of the inflation or something like that. That won't happen. So to me, that's on them. Whoever's really at fault here, technically, they should have known. They sent them the money for years and years, and they don't have a right to come back 10 years later and just give them this $108,000 bill. We're coming back to that in a second. So there's a mistake, and this goes on for a while. Now, at the very end, it says, as legally required, VA established debts for these veterans and survivors. So this is a quotation, and this is the classic bureaucracy. Well, we have to. We're required to. It's always somebody else's fault, isn't it? It's always somebody else's fault. They always have to do it. There's nothing we can do. That is total BS. Everybody knows that they can do whatever they want. Things can change. You don't have to do something just because it's written down. They change all kinds of rules all the time. And there are approximately 30,000 additional veterans and survivors who may have pension debts that have not yet been established. So we'll see what happens with them. Another 30,000, Now, it's like at the end, they encourage veterans and survivors to visit their debt management website. That's great, or call this number. Fantastic. Okay, now why did I highlight this word back here? Well, at the bottom of this letter, it says how to manage financial stress. So now they want me to contact the suicide hotline. The suicide hotline. They're telling him to contact the suicide hotline if he's feeling down, I guess, because of this. Wow, they're the ones that put me in this situation. Seems to me that if you know that you're putting someone potentially in that kind of stress, and obviously they are, especially with older veterans and stuff, they're doing something wrong. And not just that, but I really get the feeling sometimes that they're basically, that kind of thing is down there almost as like a little suggestion. Just maybe you haven't thought of this, but say that word like, suicide is in your mind. We're not saying anything. But it'd be kind of convenient if you could just sort of kick off which pretty much brings us to the next story, this one. Crisis in New York. 94-year-old vet struggles to move on after nursing home evicts him. Replaced by migrants. By the way, first of all, if you don't like Fox News, look, this is an article. Okay, I understand completely that there's the idea of the controlled opposition and all that, but I don't go around yelling faux news, and I won't read that. You read whatever comes across. We know there are certain things that are more reliable than others. You don't just write off an entire news agency. And for an article like this is definitely, the veteran and his daughter say they're more worried about migrants than Americans, okay? And with good cause, because it turns out, all right, we'll start from the top. Frank Tamaro, 94-year-old veteran, loved the senior center he'd call home for 5 years until he was told to find somewhere new to live. I felt horrible, Tamaro told Fox News. It's no joke getting thrown out of a house, okay, obviously. Now, he goes into his background a little bit and what he did and everything, and he says it was scary and, obviously, yes. The facility's owner, the New York City nonprofits being so corrupt, called Homes for the Homeless, said in a statement that it intended to sell Island Shores, quote, to focus on its core mission of serving homeless families. And the preferred buyer would be, quote, another senior operator. Well, staff assured the upset seniors that Island Shores would likely be sold and reopened. However, Tamar's daughter, Barbara Annunziata, was skeptical of the claim and reached out to the building's management for answers. We knew something was going on in there. They kept saying, oh, they're going to sell it. They're going to sell it. That's what they kept telling me. Well, people say a lot of things, don't they? Anyway, it goes on with his story. And he had to move to another place that was awful, and he moved again, and I guess he got injured at some point. Kept going. Then they noticed that the people who are moving into that old place are migrants. Isn't that nice? How do you know that wasn't part of the plan altogether? Now, there weren't that many people in this home. That doesn't make it any worse. In a way, it does make it worse because it's like, oh, there are only 8 people. Just get him out of there. Just move him along. We don't care. He's 94. He should have died a long time ago. That's the message I think people are getting, honestly. Anyway, 10,000 refugees entering the city each month. What are 8 veterans going to do against 10,000 new refugees every month? They need someplace to sleep. So anyway, he's staying at his daughter's house, I guess, something like that. He says he felt bitter at the beginning. He sort of reconciled to it. Obviously, Homes for the Homeless declined to comment. Of course. And it talks about some other statistics about how many buildings have already been converted and stuff like this. And there's this, I found this very interesting. In September 15th, 15 asylum-seeking families moved to Island Shores. As the news spread, hundreds of protesters gathered outside the facility. Well, this has got a link. Let's see where that link goes, right here. New York City leader Curtis Sliwa. Oh, Curtis Sliwa, arrested for a second time in recent days during migrant housing protests. He's been arrested? Yeah, okay, remember Curtis Sliwa? He ran for mayor. This guy? They could have had a real mayor in New York. Not Eric Adams, who's talking about New York's brand. How's that going for you, Eric? They could have had a real mayor, this guy, and they chose not to. So I just wish people would just stop electing stupid people to elective office. It's out of control. I mean, they had a choice. They had a real choice, and they made the wrong choice, big time. And we've got to just stop making these choices. And it talks a little bit about how, I was not in combat. To me, that's immaterial. He was in the military. He was sent over there. And just because you weren't on the front lines doesn't mean like you're lesser. They were made a promise, all of them, and they deserve to get it, especially when we're sending people all over the world. We've got them in places we never hear about. I mean, how many times have you heard about some base in like Angola or something? You're like, gee, I had no idea we had anybody there. They're there. I mean, they're doing their job, and we make a promise. We can't just forget about them later. So anyway, that's it for this, but I came up with a little goodbye thing for the end of this video, and actually later on I looked at it, it's like, well, it actually is kind of poignant to this, because you'll see. It's sort of like what we want our veterans to do. Watch. One other thing I forgot to mention, the links will be in the description, so you can watch the videos that are in those things as well, too, if you would like.
Спасибо. А,
Ты заходи, если что.